even if you're static, you're not 100% guaranteed protection, right? At the end of the day. Again, welcome to the world of nuance, right? If you do this, then that could happen. If you do this, if you didn't document along the way, you're going to, have a risk. All of these different things. And just to read it out of the CFR, it's just a sentence here, and it's talking about paragraph B and C, but B with regard to compensation and the different protections available against a reexamination. It says that the VA, remember the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations, is for the VA. It's a rule book on how the VA is supposed to function, right? So it's like, how are we supposed to deal with this? Let me flip to this page. Let me read this. Oh, yeah, now I remember. This is how I'm supposed to treat that. So it's for the VA is a kind of a rule book, right? I don't know how, it's not really for us. It's important for us as veterans so we understand what they're doing. So we understand the rules of the game. That's why it's important to us. But for them, that's what they're supposed to follow. So in here, it clearly states in paragraph B, which is about the reexamination piece of this section, provides general guidelines, right? General guidelines. Guidelines can be bent, right?
Yeah.
For requesting reexaminations, but shall not be construed as limiting VA's authority to request reexaminations or periods of hospital observation at any time in order to ensure that a disability is accurately rated. So to your point, directly from the CFR, what the VA would read is, oh, okay, we weren't digging, looking, but now that you did this, now we're looking at your file because you're filing for an increase, right? If you're filing for an increase on something, for example, and I'm using and veterans do this. This is what just is crazy, right? If you're filing for an increase on something you should not be filing an increase on, you risk a reduction, right? So I have mental health condition. It's been 2 years. I haven't went back at all, and I haven't been taking medication. I haven't even refilled my medication, right? Well, and I'm holding a great job and everything's wonderful. And I bought 4 houses and I got a rental property and an Escalade and whatever, right? So here I am. And you file for an increase. Well, now they're going to look into your file. They're going to see that you haven't done anything. And they're going to go, well, wait a minute. Maybe you're not as bad off. Maybe hallelujah, you're healed, right? So what static is not it is not a end all be all protection. The VA still has the ability, so you have to do your due diligence to ensure that you are making the right moves. It's a chess game, right? You definitely need to make sure that your bases are covered, right, before you make that move, right? You need to decide where these things need to be in place before you do this. Don't put the cart before the horse because it could be disastrous. All right, let's hear your story, Clay.
Yeah, before I get into that, I absolutely love that you read the CFR code. And I'm going to do an analogy here. Hopefully, no one gets a little butthurt, right? But you know how people will take a Bible verse completely out of context and just say that verse? That is exactly what people do with the CFR. They'll say, so for instance, let me share my screen real quick. This is the reexamination for scheduling exams. It says no periodic future examinations when the disability is established as static. And then other people, especially on YouTube, will say, hey, you're static, you're safe. And it's like, well, not exactly, right? Because
Right.
it's very nuanced. It kind of goes back to how we started this episode. There is no black and white answer. I'm so glad you read that straight out of the book, because it basically tells the VA, hey, it's not you can do what you want, but here's the guidelines to evaluate a static condition. And so, yes, the VA can evaluate a static condition. That's what they did for me. And so I'm gonna tell that story, right? I'm gonna leave out some details, obviously, because it's my life. So don't even ask me the details, right? In the comment section. But I was rated for mental health in 2019, and about the end of 2020. So about a year went by. That's when I went back to the VSO and I was like, hey, VSO, I would like to submit more claims. I was at 80 or 70% at that time overall. And the VSO was like, hey, you should be happy with where you're at. And that just really, it rubbed me the wrong way. That's really what started this whole journey of me learning the process for myself. And so then I learned the process. I submitted a claim for lower back pain. That was it. That was the only claim I submitted. Um, and through that appointment, the VSO did tell me that all my conditions that were rated at the time were static. And so I submitted that lower back claim, which has nothing to do with mental health. So people always ask, well, if you submit it secondary, that's what opens it up. It's like, well, that is also true, but dot dot dot. There's always a nuanced answer, right? And so in this case, it wasn't secondary. It was completely outside of mental health altogether. And because I had evidence from the VA that my mental health improved, it was reevaluated, right? And so, what was that evidence look like? Well, that whole year, I was again paraphrase seeking treatment from about 2014 to 2019. I left the Marine Corps and basically just walked into the VA and then continued my treatment for mental health stuff there. Um, paraphrase version. Hey, tell me about your mental health after a year of treatment. I said, oh, I feel a lot better. Right. What I should have said is, I'm able to, compartmentalize those feelings. I'm able to bury it deep down in my heart, in my brain. Is that the right thing to do? Probably not. But when reoccurring thoughts happen, I don't want to think about them. It definitely affects my daily life. Instead of saying all of that, I was like, I got it. I'm doing better because that's what's natural, especially for the Marines and the infantry. You're just naturally, you got it, right? Your house may be falling apart, but you got it. You'll say you have it. And so that's exactly what I did with my primary healthcare team. And unbeknownst to me at the time, I submit a lower back claim. All of a sudden, I have a reevaluation on mental health. You could probably assume I had some spikes in some anxiety at that moment, right? But you don't know what you don't know. Now I know. And so now I'm telling you, just because a condition is static and you see a video on YouTube, just like I did, that said, hey, that condition is static, don't worry about it. That's not the case. And if there's anything this video does, Jason, I would want the viewer, if you're watching any of our videos on this channel or Jason's videos on InfoTap or mine on the CivDiv or someone else's somewhere on YouTube, I would really, really argue for veterans to just not fact check, but look at the nuanced answer, right? So people say, don't poke the bear. It's like, okay, that's true. You generally don't want to, except dot dot dot. There's always another nuanced answer. If I did not poke the bear, I would have been stuck at 80%, right? If I would have took, that's essentially what the VSO told me to do, right?
Mhm.
Hey, be happy with your 80%. Oh, okay. I could have went along my day and that's it, right? And so that's what static is not. Static is not a protection of ratings. Static is it's a speed bump in the VA process if they were going to reevaluate that condition. So if that condition is static, the VA needs, we'll call it probable cause. I think that would be a good cross universe thing there, right? The VA would need probable cause to reevaluate that. But that's what happened to me. I know that happens to tons of veterans because you have the words out of your mouth during your VA healthcare appointments absolutely matter. And what sucks, Jason, and this is going to be my opinion, and actually, I would like your thoughts on this one. What sucks about VA healthcare, which I am such a fan of VA healthcare, and I think veterans, disabled veterans specifically, are in a critical spot for the need of healthcare, right? So, by no means am I saying don't seek healthcare. It's important. I still seek VA healthcare. However, when the veteran goes to VA healthcare, the perspective we have is healthcare, right? That's what we're thinking. We want to get better. We want treatment, medication, a brace, whatever the heck's going on. And the VHA has that same perspective. And so there's that common ground there. The issue is there's this other player over here, the
Right.
VBA, who's looking at it from that perspective and say, so when I said, hey, I feel a lot better, um, you know, paraphrase, the my primary healthcare team feels a lot better. And
Right.
that's the paraphrase version. The VBA sees that as a reduction. They don't really see the conversation and what's happening behind closed doors. And that's not, the veteran's not privy to that, right? And so when veterans go to VA healthcare, which is important, it's also important to, at a minimum, just be cognizant of what you're saying, right? Am I going to say I feel better? Or am I going to say, hey, doc, these feelings, these recurring thoughts still happen. Now I'm able to manage them better. I'm able to compartmentalize that. It definitely affects, when I have those thoughts, I kind of seclude myself, but I'm not crying out in public, right? Instead of saying I feel a lot better, saying what's actually happening is what veterans need to do, with the mindset of you're speaking to the VBA. It might
Right.
be your primary care, but you're
Indirectly.
speaking to the
Yeah, yeah.
VBA. Yes. And
Indirectly, because
so,
it's all being placed in your medical files, which is then going to be evidence, right? So
absolutely.
it's a real thing, right? We are not prepared. We're not being articulate with the mindset of the collateral potential damage from the
Mhm.
things we're saying. It's off the cuff. We didn't read through the CFR, through the rating schedules to see what exactly, do I still meet all this? Okay, great. I need to make sure I still say that. We're not doing that. Migraine headaches, for example. When I went in for migraines, kind of to your point, I had my CMP exam, and I same kind of concept. So are you able to work? That type of stuff. Do is your job affected in any sort of way? Was essentially the question, right? Because they were trying to see if there was any sort of financial hardship due to the migraines, because that's a requirement to reach the 50%,
Mhm.
and like an economic instability or whatever the verbiage is. And so they asked, and again, because we're proud, right? We're people. It's like, you don't want. I just met you. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so my answer was, well, and I'm going to preface it with this. I think that sometimes we tend to say something hoping that they're going to read between the lines or ask a couple more questions.
Yeah.
Usually they're not. I mean, you can have a really good CMP examiner that will, but most of the time they're just filling out the form. They're just, here we go. Okay, next question, next question, next question. Okay, great. Have a great one. Bye. So when they asked me that, my answer was, well, lucky for me, I'm working in a salaried position. So if it takes me 12 hours to finish the job in a day instead of 8, because I have a migraine where I have to go lay in the closet for 4 hours to get it to kind of dissipate, that's okay. I'm still paid the same, but are you really? You know what I mean? And did you have to take days off? And did you have to take non-paid time off? All of these things create that environment of economic instability. And it's it there was no follow-up questions, right? It was just, well, lucky for me, I'm able to, because I'm
Mhm.
salaried, if I have to kind of wake up at midnight and then try to finish the work or whatever. Um, so I didn't get the high rating of 50% because I said I was okay. And he probably said, all is fine. He didn't type in my whole explanation, right? And he didn't ask any other questions. So it's really, really important to be frank and honest, and to understand what the VA is really looking for. Because it kills me, Clay, when folks are like, you're in there for your migraines, for example, and I know that I'm off the beaten path, but you just reminded me of
Yeah.
it. So when folks go in for, let's say, a migraine CMP, and they're like, yeah, it just really affects my quality of life, and I can't do this, and I can't do that, and I can't do this, and it's like, okay, but that's not what's in the schedule of ratings. You need to go a little deeper and explain what's actually in the schedule of ratings, because that's what your rating is going to come from. And if you warrant this, then you need to make sure you're talking about that. You can talk about the other things too, but also include that. So in any case, let's circle back to the topic at hand, which is static. Being static is so important. And I'm going to throw out one more thing before we move to the next kind of portion here.
Mm-hmm.
As you are filing a claim, whether it's an increase because you've had your existing condition for 10 years and it's gotten worse, or you are filing your first claim, first time you're filing, you're getting all your stuff together and you're getting ready to file that claim, work with your doctor, right? Especially if it's a civilian doctor, right? And work with that doctor to explain, hey, look, I have had this issue since I was in service. It's been this long. We'll just keep on with migraines. I've been taking, 800 milligrams of Motrin, at least 3 times a week to combat my migraines, whatever your situation is. And, I've done that for the past 7 years or 17 years or 27 years. And now here I am at you getting a prescription for my migraines. Is there any way that we can, put in there that this is a static condition, right? You can put that verbiage in there. Static could be it's not a weird thing to add into your medical records that your doctor believes that your condition is static. You're the patient. You're the one experiencing the symptoms. You need to express it. Have that conversation. If you're getting a Nexus letter, or you could just get a letter in general where the doctor can outline that you are the patient. You are diagnosed with this condition. You've had it since whenever. This was the onset during your time in service. You've had it since. And in their opinion, your condition is static in nature and deemed not to get any better, but most likely worse. And you're trying to manage it with whatever medication. Something like that would work well as you're submitting your claim. It doesn't mean it's going to always work because the VA doesn't always get it right. But if you're giving them the information that says that your condition is static from a medical professional, they're probably going to deem you static and turn that condition into a static condition. Just food for thought, right? Give them what they need to give you back what you're looking for. Back to you, Clay.
Yeah, and submitting that evidence really sets you up for any appeals if you have to go down that route, right? That's a lot better than not having the evidence and then going for the appeal. And now you're fighting without evidence. Imagine going to court without evidence, right? That's
what it is.
Over half the time I see veterans in the appeals process, it's as if they went to court without evidence. I'm just like, what the heck is going on? But yes, evidence is absolutely key. The last thing I'll say about static is good. I like how you brought that up. When your static disabilities reach 95%, that is where P&T comes into play. So if you're wondering, hey, I'm 100% or I'm 90%, these conditions aren't static. When it comes to P&T, you either need to get evidence to make those static or get new claims that would be static. That's going to be a lot harder, assuming you're properly rated to begin with. But you have that 2 to 5 year window for those claims that aren't static, and that's going to lead us into the 5-year window rule.